My sister smirked. I told everyone your pregnancy news first so you could stop hoarding the attention, then demanded to move into my house after her marriage fell apart. So I replied, you already took the one thing that was mine. I was not letting you take my home too. The night my sister announced my pregnancy before I could, I felt my stomach drop so hard I thought I might actually throw up at the table. We were at my parents' house for my dad's birthday, and I had been waiting for dessert to tell them in a calm way, with the little ultrasound photo in my purse and my husband sitting next to me. I was only 11 weeks along. I was still scared every day that something might go wrong. I had not told anyone except my husband, because I wanted one normal moment before the whole family made it about them. My sister stole that from me in the middle of dinner like it was nothing. She stood up with her hands over her mouth, started crying, and announced to everyone that she was so happy for me because I was pregnant. Every head turned to me. Every smile in the room landed on my face whether I wanted it or not. My mother was up from her chair before I could even move, and she was hugging my sister first, like my sister had just done something brave and beautiful. My aunt started crying. My cousins started congratulating me. My father looked confused and happy and relieved all at once. And I sat there frozen, realizing my sister had done this on purpose, because of course she had. She loved attention in the worst way. She had always loved being the center of a room, even if she had to shove someone else out of it to get there. I should have known she would not let my pregnancy belong to me. I should have known because everything in our family always bent around her. She was the pretty one. She was the fragile one. She was the one who needed help, patience, grace, second chances, and emotional support from everyone. I was the one who was supposed to be understanding. I was the one who was supposed to keep the peace. So when I finally got control of my face and asked how she had found out, she acted shocked that I would even question her. She made it seem like she had only guessed because I had been tired and sick around her last weekend. That was not true. I had been careful. The only person who knew was my husband, and I had not even told my best friend yet. I remember looking at my sister and thinking something felt wrong in a deep, cold way, not just annoying. Wrong, like she had gone through my things, like she had been waiting. I did not say anything at the table because I could feel my mother watching me, and I knew the second I made a scene, the family would decide I was hormonal and ungrateful. So I smiled. I let them all congratulate me. I let my sister sit there and soak up sympathy like she had just given the family the news herself. And then I went home and cried in the dark bathroom while my husband held my shoulders and told me I was not crazy. The next morning, my sister posted about my pregnancy on social media before I had even decided what I wanted to say publicly. She did not tag me, but she made it sound like she had helped share joyful family news. A lot of people sent me messages that day. Some were sweet, some were invasive, some were from relatives I barely spoke to. What bothered me most was that my sister kept acting like she had done me some favor. She talked about how happy everyone was. She talked about how emotional my mother had been. She talked about how the family was finally getting some good news after a hard year. She never once asked if I was okay. She never asked if I had wanted her to tell anyone. I told myself I would deal with it later because I was pregnant and tired and already too emotional. I told myself it was not worth blowing up over. That was my first mistake. About 3 weeks later, my sister's marriage started falling apart in public. She had been married to Owen for 6 years. On paper, they looked fine. They had the nice house. They had the matching vacations. They had the photos where both of them were smiling so hard it looked painful. But I had never liked the way Owen got quiet whenever she entered a room. And I had never liked the way my sister talked about marriage like it was a stage she had won instead of a relationship she had built. The first sign came when she stopped posting him. Then she stopped showing up to family dinners with him. Then she told my mother that they needed space. Then she started dropping hints that things were tense at home. I assumed she was being dramatic because that was her default setting. Then one afternoon, she called my mother crying in the middle of the day. And suddenly, the whole family was acting like we were facing a natural disaster. Apparently, Owen had asked her to leave for a while. Apparently, he was being cruel. Apparently, he had refused to fight for the marriage. The version I got from her was always incomplete and always designed to make her sound like the injured party. What I did not know yet was that the reason her marriage had cracked open was much uglier than she admitted. I found that out a week later when Owen called me. He did not call to gossip. He called because he said he wanted to make sure I was not going to let my sister move into my house. That was the first time I realized she had already started telling people she would be staying with me. I had not even agreed to let her visit. He said it carefully, like he was trying not to drag me into their mess. He told me she had been talking about my house for months. He said she had mentioned the extra bedroom, the nursery, the quiet neighborhood, and how nice it would be to have a place nearby where family could help with the baby. He said he thought she was joking. Then he found out she had been texting my mother about it for weeks. I hung up on him and sat on my kitchen floor for a long time just staring at my phone, because that was not a random thought, that was a plan. My husband came home to find me crying again, and I told him what Owen had said. He asked me if I had ever given my sister any reason to think she could move in with us. I told him no, not even a little. We had bought the house together 4 years earlier, after years of saving and taking on ugly side jobs, and saying no to every easy expense. It was not huge, but it was ours. Every room in it had been paid for with our own work and a little inheritance money from my grandmother that I had refused to let my family touch. The house was the first thing in my life that felt fully mine. That mattered more now because my sister had always treated my life like a spare room she might eventually claim. Growing up, she borrowed everything: clothes, money, my notes, my car when I was still paying for gas, my time, my patience. My parents let her. They called it helping. They called me selfish when I started pushing back in my 20s. They told me I needed to be kinder because my sister had a harder time with life. That excuse had been used so many times it had basically become family law. So when Owen said she had already been talking about my house, I knew she had been building this story in her head for a while. I also knew my family would expect me to go along with it because I was pregnant and she was in crisis. The next revelation came from the most humiliating place possible, which was my own mailbox. A few days after that call, I found a stack of mail addressed to my sister using my home address. Not one envelope, several. A medical bill, a store receipt, and a change of address confirmation from the post office. My hands actually started shaking when I saw it. She had not asked me. She had not told me. She had quietly redirected her mail to my house like I was already her backup plan. I called her immediately, still furious and still trying to make sense of it. She did not answer. She texted me later that evening acting cheerful and casual like nothing was wrong. She said she had only used my address because she was staying with our mother and did not want Owen to intercept her mail. She made it sound temporary. She made it sound harmless. I did not believe her for 1 second. My mother called me the next day to tell me I needed to stop being so intense because my sister was going through a hard time. That was the moment I realized my mother already knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to stay quiet while my sister used my home as a placeholder. Enough to pretend this was normal. Enough to act like I was making a scene over paperwork. I started looking closer. What I found was worse. My sister had been sending packages to my house for almost a month. Baby stuff, not for my baby, for her hypothetical future as my house guest. A folded play mat, a box of expensive coffee mugs, a set of throw pillows in the exact color scheme of my guest room, a small portable air purifier. At first, I thought she might just be trying to be helpful in the weird, controlling way she always did things. Then I opened one of the boxes and found a shipping label with her name and my address written, as if the room already belonged to her. That was when I stopped feeling sad and started feeling scared. This was not a woman asking for help. This was a woman setting up occupancy. I did not say anything yet because I wanted to know how far it had gone, so I called Owen again, and this time he answered. He was exhausted in a way I could hear through the phone. He told me the marriage had not fallen apart because they drifted apart or because he stopped trying. It had fallen apart because he found out she had been hiding debt for years. Not small debt, real debt. Credit cards, store accounts, a personal loan, cash advances, money she had spent on clothes, travel, cosmetic treatments, and things she told everyone were gifts from him. He said he had covered for her more than once. He said he had paid late fees and moved money around and believed her when she said it was only temporary. Then he found out she had opened another account without telling him and was using it to keep up the appearance of stability. That was the day he stopped trusting her. The way he talked about it made my skin crawl because it sounded less like a marriage ending and more like a person waking up and realizing he had been living with a stranger. I asked him why he had not told the family. He laughed in a tired, bitter way and said my sister had already done a good job making herself look like the injured one. Then he told me something that made everything else make sense. He said she had started talking about my house before he ever asked her to leave. She had been saying my place would be the perfect temporary solution because I was pregnant, I would need help, and my mother would naturally want to be involved. She had framed it as family support. She had not once framed it as a favor to me. That was the first time I understood how long she had been planning this. I started looking back at every little thing she had done since I got pregnant. The way she hovered around me at the family dinner. The way she touched my stomach without asking and made jokes about being the aunt who would teach the baby everything important. The way she had asked weirdly specific questions about the layout of my house. The way she had commented that the guest room could be turned into a proper nursery if I ever wanted more space. I had thought she was being annoying. She had been mapping. I did not sleep much that week. My husband was worried about me, but he was also angry in that calm, focused way he gets when he knows someone has crossed a line. He changed our locks without making a big deal out of it. He installed a camera at the front door and one by the back gate. He told me not to feel guilty about protecting our home. That should have comforted me, but instead it made me feel strange, because I hated that I needed those precautions against my own sister. Then my mother showed up uninvited with a basket of baked goods and a face full of practiced sympathy. She sat at my kitchen table and started talking around the issue instead of naming it. She told me my sister had nowhere to go. She told me marriage could be cruel. She told me family needed to come first now. I asked if she was expecting my sister to stay with us. She avoided answering directly, which was answer enough. I asked if she had already told my sister yes on my behalf. She said I was being dramatic. That was when I knew she had. I remember standing there with my hands on the edge of the counter, trying to stay calm for the baby, trying not to scream at the person who had raised me to swallow my own needs. My mother said I had room. She said the baby would not even use the guest room right away. She said my sister just needed a soft place to land. She said I should understand because my sister had been so upset over the announcement and the marriage trouble and all the stress she had been carrying. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so insulting I could not believe she was saying it out loud. My mother looked hurt, as if I had been the one to betray her. I asked her whether she had forgotten whose pregnancy my sister had announced without permission. I asked her whether she had forgotten that I had not invited anyone to speak for me. I asked her whether she seriously expected me to give up my home, so my sister could recover from choices she had made while lying to everyone around her. My mother left after that, but not before telling me I was turning a family problem into a personal grudge. That sentence stayed with me for days, because that was how they always did it. They turned other people's boundaries into personal grudges. They turned disrespect into misunderstanding. They turned entitlement into need. 2 days later, my sister came over without warning. She brought 1 suitcase and 3 shopping bags, which turned out to be her way of making the visit look lighter than it was. She did not ask to come in. She acted as though she was already allowed. She walked through my house slowly, looking at the guest room, the hall closet, the spare bathroom, and my office like she was inspecting a rental. I followed her, furious but still trying to stay calm. She told me she only needed a few months. She told me she could help with the baby. She told me the extra room was wasted anyway. She told me she could not stay at our mother's house because it was too tense. She told me she could not go back to Owen because he was being vindictive. Every sentence she said was built to make me feel guilty. Every sentence came with a hidden threat. When she saw the nursery area I had started to set up, she looked almost pleased, like it proved her point. That was when she finally let her real reason slip. She said it would be easier for everyone if she stayed with us because she and the baby would be close. The baby, not my baby. She said it so casually that I had to stop walking. I asked her what baby she was talking about. She looked offended that I even needed clarification. Then she said it again in a way that made my stomach twist. She was already talking about my child like she had a stake in my child's life. Not as an aunt, as a cooner of the situation. I told her no. I told her she was not moving in. I told her my house was not her fallback plan. I told her I was not letting her use my pregnancy to sell a sob story to the rest of the family while she figured out her next move. She stared at me for a second, and then her whole face changed. Not anger, calculation, like she had just realized soft pressure was not going to work and now she would need another tactic. She left in a fury without shouting, which somehow felt worse. By that evening, my phone started exploding. My aunt sent me a long message about compassion. My cousin texted me to say family was supposed to stick together. My father called twice and did not leave a voicemail. My mother sent a message saying she was disappointed in me. And my sister posted something vague online about going through a painful chapter and being grateful for the people who showed their true colors. That was when I realized she was making me the villain before I even had a chance to explain. The problem was, I still did not have all the facts. So I started asking more questions. I reached out to a woman who worked with my sister and learned she had taken several days off without telling anyone why. I talked to a mutual friend who had been helping her pack up some things, and I heard the same thing Owen had said in a different form. My sister had been telling people she would stay with me because I had space, and because pregnant women were supposed to be surrounded by family. She had also been telling people my husband loved her more than I did, which was bizarre enough that I almost laughed when I heard it. But the weirdest part was that she had already arranged for some of her belongings to go into storage with my address listed as the emergency contact location. It was not just emotional manipulation. It was paperwork. She was building a paper trail around my house. I sat with that information for a long time because it made the whole thing feel colder. This was not just a desperate sister in a crisis. This was someone trying to create a believable story before she needed it. And then Owen called me again with one last piece. He said my sister had told him she might need to stay with me for a while because our parents were getting too involved, and because I would understand once the baby came. He said she had apparently told him she was doing me a favor by keeping family close. Then he told me she had asked him to agree in writing that my house was a stable place for her to stay if the divorce got ugly. That was when I finally understood she had been trying to use my home not just as a bed, but as leverage. If she could prove she had a place to go, she could look more sympathetic. If she could pin her future to my address, she could make herself look settled. If she could get my family to back her, she could keep control over the story. I was not just saying no to a guest. I was refusing to be part of a strategy. Once I understood that, I stopped feeling torn. I started documenting everything. I saved screenshots. I photographed the mail. I wrote down dates and times. I checked the camera footage from our front porch, and what I found made my blood go cold. My sister had come by while I was out for a prenatal appointment and had tried my door twice before leaving a small package by the steps. The package contained a nursery rug for my house, not as a gift, as a symbol. I stood there in my living room staring at the footage, and I knew she had crossed into something I could no longer treat as family drama, so I called a lawyer. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my father. I told my husband, and he was proud of me in a way that almost made me cry again. The lawyer told me to keep everything, especially anything that showed my sister trying to establish residence or implying she had permission. That advice hit me harder than I expected, because it confirmed my instincts were not overreactions. This was real. This had legal edges. The next family gathering happened less than a week later, because apparently my relatives could not survive without making everything into a ritual. It was supposed to be a dinner for my grandmother's birthday. I almost did not go, but my husband said he would come with me and leave the second I got uncomfortable. When we arrived, my sister was already there, sitting at the head of the table like she had been invited to host. That alone would have annoyed me. What actually set me off was seeing a pile of folded baby clothes on the sideboard with my sister's name written on a storage label. She had brought them to my grandmother's birthday dinner, as if this was now her domestic crisis showcase. Everyone pretended not to notice the tension. My mother pretended we were all being mature. My sister looked smug in a way that made my skin crawl. She spent half the meal talking about how hard it was to be displaced. She did not use my name, but she did not need to. The story was obvious to everyone. She made sure the whole table knew she had a sister with a house and a baby and plenty of room. She made sure they knew she had been rejected. She made sure they knew she was the one who had tried to hold the family together. Then she sat back and waited for my relatives to punish me for not folding. My grandmother was the first one to surprise me. She had always been quiet during family drama, mostly because she was old enough to understand how useless it was to argue with stubborn people. But that night, she looked at my sister and asked, very calmly, why she was storing baby clothes in another person's house if she had not been invited there. The table went silent. My sister said she was only keeping her things organized. My grandmother asked why those things were organized around my address. My mother stepped in immediately and tried to smooth it over. She said my sister was stressed and needed support. My grandmother looked straight at her and asked why support had to mean surrender. I nearly cried right there. It was the first time anyone in my family had made my sister answer for herself instead of letting her tears do the work. She did not have a good response. She did what she always did when challenged. She turned on the hurt face. She made herself small. She waited for someone to rescue her. Nobody did, at least not immediately. Then my father, who had been quiet all night, admitted something that changed everything. He said he had known my sister was asking about my house, because she had also asked him whether I would be willing to put her on the deed temporarily if she needed a place after the divorce. I thought I had misheard him. I had not. He had said it clearly enough to make the whole table freeze again. My sister's face went dead still. I think she realized right then that he had just exposed her in front of the one person who was not supposed to know how far she had gone. I asked him what he had said in response. He admitted he had not shut it down as hard as he should have. He said he told her to talk to me and let things work out. That was his version of protection. He had not encouraged her exactly. He had just not stopped her, which in our family was basically the same thing. Then my aunt, who had always been one of my sister's biggest fans, quietly asked whether she had actually planned to move in before her marriage ended. My sister did not answer. That silence answered for her. The dinner never recovered. People started leaving early. Nobody wanted to stay once the polite mask had cracked. My husband and I got home first, and I sat in the car for a few extra minutes because I was shaking. I did not know whether I was angry or sad or both. Probably both. That was when I got a text from Owen. He had heard about the dinner through one of my cousins. He said he wanted to send me copies of the financial records he had gathered because he was done covering for her. I almost did not open them. When I did, I found a mess of hidden spending so large it made my head hurt. There were charges for luxury clothes, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, beauty appointments, and a weekend trip she had taken with a man from her gym before the separation became public. The trip had happened while she was still telling everyone she was fighting for her marriage. That detail mattered because it changed the whole story she had been selling. She had not been abandoned out of nowhere. She had been double-timing her own life while expecting sympathy from all directions. The moment I saw those receipts, I understood why she wanted my house so badly. She was drowning in consequences. My home was not just a couch to her. It was a buffer against the truth. If she could land there, she could claim she had support. If she could stay with me, she could pretend the family was helping her rebuild. If she could get me to open the door, she could keep controlling the narrative. I was done. The next morning, I sent her one message through email because I did not trust phone calls anymore. I told her she was not moving in. I told her she was not using my address. I told her I had cameras, documents, and a lawyer. I told her if she tried to come onto my property again without permission, I would treat it as trespassing. I kept it plain. No insults, no drama, no room for her to twist later. Her response came through our mother within an hour. My mother said I was cruel. She said I was punishing my sister while she was vulnerable. She said I was making the family choose sides. That was when I finally understood how deeply they had all decided I was supposed to carry the load. My mother was not upset because my sister had lied. She was upset because I had stopped smoothing over the mess. I think that was the real fracture point, not the pregnancy announcement, not even the moving in demand. It was the fact that I had become inconvenient. Once I was no longer willing to be used, the family did not know what to do with me. A few days later, my sister tried a different angle. She showed up while I was not home and left a stack of boxes on my porch. The camera caught her. She had apparently assumed I would feel too guilty to reject her once her things were physically in front of my door. She was wrong. I called the non-emergency line and asked what my options were for having unwanted property removed and for documenting attempted access to my home. That call felt surreal. I had spent most of my life trying to avoid being the dramatic one in the family. Now I was learning how to protect myself like a person who had to. The officer who came by later was polite and clearly not surprised by anything he heard. He told me to keep the footage, send a formal notice, and document every future visit. He also told me I should probably stop answering the door for my mother for a while. That was the first truly practical advice I had gotten from anyone in this mess. My sister found out I had contacted the police because, of course, my mother told her. After that, she went nuclear in the only way she knew how. She spread the story that I was refusing to help a pregnant woman during a family emergency. Except she left out the part where she was not pregnant. She left out the part where she had lied about the moving plans for weeks. She left out the part where she had tried to insert herself into my home before asking. The family split right down the middle. Some people believed her because they always believed the softer version of her. Some people believed me because the evidence was too specific to ignore. I got messages from relatives I had not heard from in years. A few accused me of being cold. A few apologized for not seeing it sooner. One cousin told me privately that my sister had also been asking around about whether there was any way she could be listed as an emergency caregiver for my baby. That one made me feel physically sick. I had not told many people because I was still only halfway through the pregnancy and wanted privacy. She had already been building a role for herself around my child. I told my husband, and he went quiet in the way that meant he was genuinely alarmed. We made a decision then that changed the rest of the pregnancy. My sister and my mother were not going to be allowed near my appointments anymore. They were not going to get details. They were not going to get updated due dates. They were not going to have access to the nursery plan. I stopped sharing progress pictures. I stopped answering surprise visits. I stopped pretending the family deserved automatic access to my life. That was harder than it sounds. A part of me still wanted my mother to be excited for me in a real way. A part of me still wanted my sister to act like a normal human being for 5 minutes. But the more space I made, the clearer everything became. My sister was not confused. She was not lost. She was not just emotional. She was entitled in a way that had been rewarded for years, and because nobody had ever truly made her face consequences, she had started believing every boundary was negotiable. Then the final twist landed, and it landed hard. Owen sent me an email with attachments from his attorney. My sister had used my home address on a loan application, not in a harmless way. She had listed it as a future residence to strengthen the impression that she had stable family support after the separation. She had not told me. She had not asked me. She had used my address as part of her plan to look safer to lenders and, according to her own lawyer, to strengthen her custody position if she chose to push for one. I stared at that email for a long time, because suddenly the nursery comments, the question about the deed, the pressure from my mother, the boxes on the porch, the fake concern, all of it fit together in a way that made my skin feel cold. She had not just wanted a place to stay. She had wanted my house to become part of her legal story. That was the biggest betrayal of all, not because of money, although money was part of it. Not because of the pregnancy announcement, although that still hurt. It was because she had been willing to turn my home into evidence for her own survival while pretending it was only family help. I called my lawyer again and forwarded everything. After that, the tone changed fast. A formal letter went to my sister. Another one went to my mother after she kept contacting me on her behalf. The letters were not dramatic. They were just clear. No residence, no mailing address changes, no property drops, no unauthorized visits, no representation to anyone that my house belonged to or would house my sister. Suddenly, everybody in my family who had been demanding grace now acted, shocked that I had taken things so seriously. My mother said I was tearing the family apart. My father said I was going too far. My aunt said I was making it legal when it could have stayed emotional. That one actually made me laugh, because apparently the family thought emotion was all I owed them. My sister stopped posting for a while after that. Then she tried a new public angle and made herself look like she was bravely starting over with nothing but dignity. It would have been funny if it had not been so transparent. Then Owen filed for divorce, and everything he had been hinting at suddenly became part of the formal record. The debts came out. The spending came out. The travel came out. The lying came out. So did the part where she had told his family she expected to stay with me for a while because my house had room, and I would not let a pregnant woman be abandoned. That was the first time I felt real vindication because it meant I had not imagined the whole thing. She really had been building a landing pad using my name. The divorce itself was ugly. I did not follow every detail because I did not want to drown in it, but the consequences moved fast. She lost access to several accounts. She had to pay back money she had moved around without telling him. She had to move her stuff out of the house they shared. And when she tried to claim she needed temporary support from the family, my parents actually considered helping her settle into a rental. That should have been the end of it. It was not. She still tried one last time to get into my house. I was at a doctor appointment when my camera sent an alert. She had shown up with 2 large suitcases and my mother. My mother was carrying groceries like this was normal. My sister was standing by the front door looking exhausted and wounded and determined. The footage showed her trying my handle, then trying the side gate, then standing there as if waiting for the door to open out of sympathy. My husband was with me at the appointment, so he got home first. He did not open the door. He called the police after confirming they had no permission. By the time I got home, they were gone, but the groceries were still on the porch. So was a handwritten note from my mother telling me she hoped I was proud of myself. I did not answer. I kept the note for my file and dropped the groceries off at a food pantry later that week because I was too angry to even look at them. The police report did not go anywhere dramatic, but it did create enough of a record that my sister finally understood I was not bluffing. She did not come to the house again, not after that. Not directly. Instead, she used other people to keep the pressure on. She had my aunt call. She had my cousin send emotional messages. She had my mother keep asking whether I really wanted to be the kind of sister who shut out family when they needed help. Every message made the same mistake. They kept talking as if she had asked for help in good faith. She had not. She had tried to take over my life in pieces. And once I stopped pretending otherwise, the whole family had to sit with it. The weirdest part was how quiet my father became. He had always been the softer parent, the one who hated conflict and let my mother manage everything. But one evening he called me alone and asked to come over. He sat in my kitchen for almost half an hour before he admitted that he had known more than he let on. He had known my sister was in debt months before the marriage collapsed. He had known she was asking around about my home. He had known she had exaggerated how bad things were. He said he had wanted to believe she would calm down if nobody pushed back. That was his way of saying he had hoped I would absorb it all quietly like I always had. I told him I loved him, but I was done being the buffer. He cried a little, which surprised me because my father almost never cried. Then he admitted something else. He said he and my mother had spent years treating my sister like she was the one who needed the most care because she was the one who made the biggest emotional mess when she did not get her way. He said they had leaned on me because I was steadier. He said they had mistaken steadiness for unlimited capacity. That was probably the most honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in years. It did not fix anything, but it did explain a lot. After that, the family stopped pretending there was no pattern. My mother did not apologize the way I wanted her to. She apologized the way people do when they still think the biggest problem is that everyone is upset. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she thought I would be stronger. She said she thought I could handle it. That was not an apology. That was a confession. It said she had believed my resilience made me available. I told her that was exactly the problem. When my baby was born, I did not call my sister. I did not call my mother from the delivery room either. I called my husband, and then I called my father after we were stable and home, because he had at least made one honest effort to see what was happening. My mother found out through a photo text from him. She was furious that I had not told her first. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Even after the pregnancy announcement mess, even after the house issue, even after the legal letters, she still thought the birth of my child should orbit her feelings. My sister sent a gift after the baby was born. It was expensive and very thoughtful looking. It came with a card that made no mention of everything that had happened. No apology, no ownership, no acknowledgement of the damage. Just a polished attempt at re-entry. I gave the gift away unopened. A few weeks later, she asked through a cousin whether she could come see the baby. I said no, not yet, maybe not ever. The cousin looked surprised when I said it so flatly, but I was past worrying about being the villain in stories other people told. The real ending came 6 months later. My sister's divorce settled in a way that clearly embarrassed her more than she would ever admit. She had to move into a small apartment on the other side of town. My mother started driving there constantly, bringing groceries and trying to rebuild the illusion that my sister had been wronged by life instead of repeatedly boxed in by her own choices. My father came by my house less and less often, but when he did, he was careful. He asked before touching the baby. He did not make assumptions. He did not tell me what I owed anyone. That mattered. My sister eventually sent a message through. Yet another cousin saying she hoped we could put everything behind us for the sake of the family. I did not answer that one either. I was too busy being a mother in a house that finally felt quiet again. Sometimes I still think about that dinner when she announced my pregnancy and stole the first happy moment I had for this baby. I think about how the whole room turned to her like she had performed some act of generosity. I think about how easy it was for my family to let her take that moment. And I think about how close I came to letting her take my house too, just because I was tired and pregnant and raised to keep the peace. What saved me was realizing that peace was never really the goal. Control was. She wanted attention, then she wanted access, then she wanted permanence, then she wanted a legal foothold, and every time I gave an inch, somebody in my family called it love. I wish I could say the whole thing ended with a dramatic apology and a clean reunion. It did not. My mother still acts wounded around me sometimes. My sister still tells people I overreacted. Some relatives still think I should have been more generous, but my home is still mine. My marriage is stronger for surviving it. My child will never know the version of this family where every boundary belonged to my sister by default. And I learned something I wish I had learned years earlier. Being the reliable one does not mean being available for theft. Not of your news, not of your body, not of your house, not of your life. When I look at my baby now, I think about how much worse this could have gotten if I had folded just to keep everyone comfortable. My sister tried to turn my pregnancy into her spotlight and my home into her safety net. In the end, she got neither. She got a divorce, a paper trail, a police report, and a family that finally had to see her without all the excuses layered over her. I got my house back. I got my voice back, and I got to learn the hard way. That sometimes the only way to protect your family is to stop protecting the people who keep hurting it.